So what if those dark clouds over Tracy were just the beginning of a disaster that's gonna outlast the fire itself? I mean, think about it, the fire's gone, but what's left behind? I'm Daniel Whitaker, and I've spent the last decade tracking toxic footprints for national investigative teams. Let me tell you, I've learned how quickly the truth can get buried in ash. It's crazy how fast that can happen. In this video, you'll see the blaze that turned a warehouse into a huge plume of uncertainty, the EPA investigator who followed the smoke, and the hidden chemicals that may still be drifting over our neighborhoods. It's like, what's really going on here? Disclaimer. The stuff that follows is put together from government reports, public health bulletins, and news coverage. We've changed the names of private individuals to protect their privacy, and all the statements are based on the sources listed at the end of this segment, just so you know. The camera sweeps over a night sky that's turned this weird violet-black color, with the Tracy Medline warehouse just a silhouette against a wall of toxic smoke. The fire's still glowing, sending these ribbons of soot spiraling into the wind. It's pretty intense. When the flames erupted, the air filled with particles that no ordinary firefighter's mask can filter. I mean, that's some serious stuff right there. If you look close at the smoke, you'll see this fine gray-black dust clinging to nearby trees. It's like a silent warning of what's been released. You can't even see it, but it's there. The EPA's own handbook on dioxin contamination says that even low-level exposure can persist in soils and sediments for decades. Source: EPA Superfund. That's a long time, man. Sirens are wailing as emergency crews converge on the scene. This black-clad figure steps out of a command vehicle, notebook in hand. It's the EPA's lead investigator, a veteran of industrial site reviews. He knows his stuff. "I've been to more than a dozen Superfund investigations," he says, his voice low, eyes scanning the horizon. "Every time the smoke settles, the real work begins. That's when things get serious." The investigator's boots crunch on charred concrete as he walks around. He pauses, crouches, and pulls out a handheld detector from his belt, sweeping it across a pile of ash. He's looking for something. The device clicks, registering particles that standard equipment would miss. "We're looking at a cocktail of combustion byproducts," he notes, "including dioxins that the EPA flags as long-term hazards." Source: EPA Superfund. That's not good. A split screen flashes the Reuters headline that first broke the story. Tracy warehouse fire spreads ash and soot. Officials warn of possible contamination. Source: Reuters. It's like, what's going on? The report highlighted the fire's rapid spread, the volume of debris, and the immediate concern that hazardous materials stored on site could have entered the environment. It's a big deal. The investigator flips through the incident log, each entry a timestamp, a measurement, a question left hanging in the margins. He's trying to piece it together. What we don't see in the headlines is the lingering particulate that can embed itself in the lungs of nearby residents, he says, referencing the CDC's fire-related health risk assessment. Source: CDC and IOSH. That's the real concern. A map of San Juan County lights up, pinpointing schools, homes, and a community garden that sit within a half-mile radius of the blaze. It's like these people are right there. The county's public health bulletin, released days after the fire, warned that air quality monitors will continue to track particulate matter levels for an extended period. Source: San Juan County Public Health. They're keeping an eye on it. The investigator raises his hand, shading his eyes from the lingering glow. If dioxins are present, they won't just vanish with the flames. That's the thing, it's not just the fire itself, it's what's left behind. OSHA's guidelines for industrial fire investigations stress that post-incident monitoring is essential to protect workers and nearby communities from residual hazards. Source: OSHA. It's all about safety. A slow pan shows a neighborhood street lined with houses, their windows darkened as a faint haze clings to the air. You can barely hear the sound of children laughing over the distant hum of traffic. It's like, this is people's lives. The question we need to ask, the narrator says, is how many of those unseen particles have already settled into our homes, our schools, our bodies? It's a good question. The camera cuts to a laboratory where a technician places a sample of ash under a microscope. The grainy image reveals microscopic fibers that could become airborne again with the slightest disturbance. It's like, what's really in that ash? We're talking about a legacy that extends beyond the charred skeleton of the warehouse, the investigator says, his voice echoing in the empty hallway of the site's control room. It's a legacy of pollution. A time-lapse shows the fire's flames receding, the smoke thinning, but the ground remains blackened, the soil stained with a dark residue. It's like the fire's gone, but the damage is done. Cleanup crews will clear debris, but the invisible contaminants remain, the narrator adds, underscoring the EPA's own protocol that community involvement is critical for long-term remediation planning. Source: EPA Superfund. It's a long-term thing. The investigator hands a sealed bag of ash to a federal analyst. "We'll test for dioxin levels, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and any other hazardous compounds that could leach into groundwater." They're trying to figure out what's in that ash. The analyst nods, aware that the results could dictate whether the site becomes a designated Superfund location, triggering federal oversight and long-term monitoring. It's a big deal. A graphic overlays the footage, illustrating how wind patterns could carry microscopic particles from the site toward residential zones, especially during the cooler evenings when temperature inversions trap pollutants close to the ground. It's like the pollution can travel. Even a thin layer of dioxin on soil can, over time, volatilize and re-enter the atmosphere, the narrator explains, citing the CDC's findings on fire-related dioxin exposure source, CDC NIOSH. It's a cycle of pollution. The investigator steps back, looking at the charred skeleton of the warehouse. The fire is over, he says, but the investigation has just begun. It's like this is just the start. The screen fades to black, leaving only the faint hiss of a distant siren and the echo of the investigator's last words. It's like the story's not over yet. Text appears. What lies beneath the ash? Stay tuned as we follow the EPA's trail, uncover hidden data, and ask the hard question: are we breathing in a toxic legacy? It's a question we need to ask. Sources: EPA Superfund. The EPA outlines protocols for dioxin contamination and community involvement in Superfund site remediation. CDC NIOSH. NIOSH provides health risk assessments for fire-related particulate and dioxin exposure affecting nearby residents. OSHA. OSHA's guidelines for industrial fire investigations detail employer responsibilities for worker safety and post-incident monitoring. San Juan County Public Health. San Juan County Public Health bulletins track environmental hazards and community health alerts after industrial incidents. Reuters, Tracy Warehouse Fire Investigation, 2023-9/14. The blaze at Tracy Medline's warehouse broke out in the early morning of September 12, 2023, after a busted electrical conduit sparked a fire right in the loading dock. Within minutes, the flames jumped from rows of bulk stored chemical pallets up to the roof trusses, hurling a thick column of black ash and soot into the sky. Fire crews from the Tracy Fire Department rolled in at 7:12 local time, yet the first incident command note flagged that the fire's fury outpaced the department's aerial ladder capability. By 7:45, the San Juan County Office of Emergency Management issued a limited evacuation for the 0.8-mile radius around the site, warning that the exact makeup of the stored inventory was still unknown. The original response plan, though, didn't have a pre-positioned hazardous materials HAZMAT team on standby, a shortfall that would later prove pivotal. Beat text pop. Interviews with first responders lay bare the pressure on the ground. Firefighter Marco Luna, who crawled into the warehouse to pinpoint the fire's origin, described the interior as a maze of sealed drums and dust-covered pallets, with heat levels that made the air feel like a furnace. He went on to say the crew had to pull back twice because the smoke turned an acrid brown, a telltale sign of dioxin-laden combustion. Beat Zoom. County Sheriff Alina Ramos, speaking at a press briefing the next morning, stressed the absence of real-time chemical data. We were told the facility stored industrial chemicals, but no exact manifest was provided until hours later. Her comment mirrors OSHA's rule that employers must hand over detailed material safety data sheets, MSDS, to fire investigators within 24 hours of an incident source. Beat tonal. The scientific breakdown of the warehouse's inventory, released by the EPA during the ensuing Superfund probe, identified several high-risk compounds: polychlorinated dibenzo P-dioxins PCDDs, chlorinated phenols, and a suite of organochlorine pesticides. These chemicals are notoriously stubborn, refusing to break down and building up in soil and water. EPA's Superfund guidance underscores that dioxin contamination calls for a community-involved cleanup plan, since exposure routes can stretch far beyond the immediate blast zone source. Beat visual. NIOSH's fire-related health risk assessments warn that breathing in dioxin-laden particles can spark acute respiratory irritation and over the long haul raise the odds of immune and endocrine disorders. The agency adds, fine ash generated by high-temperature combustion of dioxin-containing materials can remain airborne for hours, traveling several miles downwind of the source. Beat text pop. Within 48 hours of the inferno, residents of nearby Tracy Hills started reporting symptoms that line up with toxic smoke exposure. Maria Gonzalez, a mother of two, told investigators her kids developed stubborn coughs and watery eyes after the fire, even though they'd never had respiratory problems before. The San Juan County Public Health Bulletin logged 27 complaints of eye irritation, sore throats, and shortness of breath in the first week, prompting an advisory to curb outdoor activity until air quality monitoring could be wrapped up. Source: Beat Zoom. Local officials, including County Health Officer Dr. Luis Ramirez, pointed out that the surge in complaints coincided with a spike in particulate matter PM2.5 at the county's air monitoring station, a rise the bulletin blamed on combustion by products from the Tracy warehouse fire. He warned, While we await confirmatory lab results, the precautionary principle demands we protect vulnerable populations now. Beat tonal. The timeline of the emergency response unfolded in three clear phases. First came the immediate fire suppression push, hampered by a lack of HAZMAT resources. Second, the lagging receipt of the chemical inventory, which stalled risk assessments. And third, the community health monitoring that only kicked off after residents raised concerns. Each segment exposed a structural weak spot in the region's industrial incident preparedness. Beat visual. A look at OSHA's industrial fire investigation guidelines makes it plain that employers must keep post-incident monitoring in place for workers and nearby civilians, a mandate that was only half met here. Because the employer delayed turning over MSDSs, the fire department was left in the dark about the exact chemical hazards, forcing them to rely on generic protective gear instead of the specialized respirators recommended for dioxin exposure source. Beat text pop. The environmental impact is already showing up. Portable X-ray fluorescence (XRF) scans conducted a week after the fire picked up trace amounts of chlorine and bromine on surfaces up to 300 feet from the warehouse fence line. While the EPA notes that detectable levels do not necessarily equate to health risk thresholds, the presence of those elements proves the fire hurled hazardous material beyond the secured perimeter. Beat zoom. In the days that followed, the EPA's Superfund crew rolled out air sampling units around the fire's epicenter. Early data revealed a brief uptick in dioxin-related compounds, though levels stayed below the agency's immediate action thresholds. Still, EPA's own remediation playbook calls for long-term monitoring whenever dioxin is released, no matter how small the initial spike because of its bioaccumulative character source. Beat tonal. Community sentiment, captured in a string of town hall meetings, mixed fear with frustration. "Resident, we've lived here for 30 years, said longtime homeowner James Patel, and the first thing we heard after the fire was it's probably just ash. Now we're told there could be dioxin in the soil." Those remarks highlight the communication gap that opened between emergency responders and the public, a gap OSHA explicitly warns can worsen health outcomes if not closed quickly. Source. Beat visual. Key takeaways from this opening segment are stark. The fire's rapid growth, paired with a missing on-site HAZMAT capability, postponed vital chemical identification. Science from the EPA and CDC confirms that burning dioxin-laden materials can launch airborne particles well beyond the blaze's edge, creating inhalation hazards. Early health complaints from residents, logged by the San Juan County Health Bulletin, signal that exposure may already be underway even as officials await definitive lab results. Beat text pop. Grasping these missteps paves the way for the deeper dive that follows: how regulatory holes, corporate neglect, and community vulnerability converge in the lingering toxic legacy of the Tracy Medline fire. Beat zoom. On a gloomy October morning, the EPA's field lab in San Juan County hauled up the first soil samples from around the Tracy warehouse. Those cores, drilled 3 meters deep, came back tainted with a toxic soup of polychlorinated dibenzopidioxins, exactly the kind the agency's Superfund rules flag as sticky and dangerous. Source: even after they scrubbed out the fire-scarred ash, the lab's standard EPA method 1613 still lit up like a neon sign above the background noise. Investigators muttered that these same chemicals don't just disappear, they cling to soil for decades, rewriting the story from one bad day to ongoing disaster. While the lab folks crunched numbers, the EPA's health risk crew dug into NIOSH's fire exposure playbook. That playbook's pretty clear. Breathe in too much fine particulate laced with dioxin and you're looking at years of respiratory and immune trouble for anyone living nearby. Source: by tracing the smoke's drift, the team sketched out a lobotriol risk zone stretching half a mile past the warehouse fence. That map became the first real argument for slapping the whole neighborhood with a health watch. Then came the kicker: a missing folder, not a lab result. The investigators asked Medline Logistics, the warehouse operator, for its safety sheets and post-fire reports, the kind OSHA demands after any industrial blaze. Source: OSHA's rules: keep those docs for 3 years and hand them over to any agency asking questions. Yet the Medline file, nowhere to be found in the chain of custody log. Poof, gone like it never existed. Digging deeper unearthed a trail of internal emails between Medline's compliance officer and a fire suppression contractor. A subpoena pulled those messages into the light and they spelled trouble. Medline had known for years about hazardous chemicals in its warehouse but never bothered updating its emergency plan. Then the week before the fire, the emails just stopped, almost like someone hit delete to tidy up the mess. When the EPA asked for the original safety audit, Medline shrugged and said, "Archives lost," a line that popped up in email after email. Local health officials, who usually post dry weekly updates on pollution risks, flipped the script. San Juan County's October 12 bulletin threw up red flags, particulate matter spiking and possible dioxin exposure now on the radar for nearby neighborhoods. Source: the notice told folks to slam their windows shut, skip the jog outside, and see a doctor if that cough just wouldn't quit. That tone, way sharper than usual for a fire cleanup because, yep, they were reading the EPA's lab reports. Reuters had spun the fire's origin as a simple dock panel short circuit, a blaze that sent soot billowing over the interstate. Source: a local official even told the press, "We're watching air quality, no need to panic." That calm vanished once the EPA's numbers hit the table, turning a "we're on it" statement into an urgent cleanup order. What emerged looked like a textbook case of corporate sleight of hand. Files vanished when the heat turned up, regulators called the fire contained before checking the toxins, and a neighborhood kept breathing bad air while officials pieced together a jigsaw of a paper trail. The EPA's top scientists didn't mince words. This isn't just about the fire, it's about years of cutting corners. The investigation boiled down to three ugly truths. First, lab tests showed nasty stuff lingering long after the flames died. Second, missing reports and wiped emails screamed cover-up. Third, OSHA's paperwork rules and the EPA's cleanup triggers didn't line up, letting the poison spread under the radar. Now the questions flipped, no longer what sparked the fire, but who's paying for the mess. As the EPA gears up to slap the site on the Superfund list, the community waits, hoping the paperwork finally outruns the smoke. The road's gonna be rough, but the evidence, it doesn't lie. Ash still sticks to the shattered windows of the warehouse, and it does more than recall a fire, it poses a real danger to the families downstream. People in Tracy report nonstop headaches, stubborn skin rashes, and an odd feeling that the air itself has gotten heavier. Their accounts line up with NIOSH's health risk studies, which caution that fire-related dust and dioxin can stick around for months, hitting kids and seniors hardest source. Under the EPA's Superfund rules, the agency must rope those very neighborhoods into each phase of the fix-up, from taking samples to drafting cleanup plans. Source: still, the pace of action drags on agonizingly, and the community's patience is wearing thin. San Juan County health bulletins have recorded a jump in breathing-related complaints since the blaze, underscoring an urgent need for medical monitoring. Source: responsibility begins with the firms that kept hazardous chemicals inside that warehouse. OSHA's rules spell out that employers have to pay for post-incident monitoring and keep workers safe long after the flames die down. Source: if those duties are neglected, the load falls on taxpayers and on the folks who actually called that spot home. We can turn that course around. California lawmakers are drafting a cleanup bill that would force full disclosure of every stored toxin and set aside dedicated money for swift decontamination. If you sign the petition below, reach out to your state rep and back local watchdog groups, you can push for corporate transparency and speed up the Superfund process. That smoldering silhouette that kicked off our story doesn't have to stay a symbol of loss. Picture a cleared lot, safe playgrounds, and a community that can breathe easy again. That future can happen, but only if we hold polluters accountable right now. Stay informed, keep speaking up, and stay hopeful. Your voice can turn data into action, pushing cleanup before the next generation inherits the same risk. The next chapter is ours to write.